Hello, I'm Jovian D'Souza, and this is the presentation for React Native Okto SDK. So let's get started. So the features of the SDK include strongly typed support, has support for all the Okto B1 APIs, has a secure PIN authentication mechanism using WASM and WebAssembly. Thanks to the React Native, we can use efficient web view rendering, support for job management, wrapper functions, and example app. So let's go through these one by one. So before that, let's talk about the key differences between the old SDK and the new SDK. So the old SDK is just a wrapper on top of the Flutter SDK, whereas the new SDK is a fully React Native SDK. This makes it fast and efficient as we no longer have to use the slower Flutter VM. We also have secure pin code mechanism using WebAssembly. Um, Another thing is the new SDK uses promises instead of callbacks. This provides a better syntax and a better development experience for the clients who are using this SDK. And as a bonus point, we also have one line installation as compared to the Flutter where we have to manually set the dependencies in the Android files. Yeah. So installing it aside is a one line command. It installs the SDK as well as some peer dependencies. Um, there's a slight change in the way how we initialize the SDK. So since it's a React Native component, we need to wrap the app component inside the Okto provider. And the Okto provider, we need to pass the client APIs and the build type. In order to use the functions from the Okto provider, we need to import the use Okto hook and the Okto context type from the SDK. And whatever function we need, for example, authenticate, can be simply imported and used like this. So here's the change for callbacks versus promises. Um, Promises provide a flexible syntax, so the clients who use SDK can use both a sync await or a then catch pattern. Um, and secondly, it's a strongly type. So for example, in this case, the result has a type associated with it, whereas in the callbacks, we need to manually provide the type. The advantage of strongly type, it gives a much better developer experience. Yeah. Here's the API reference consisting of all the functions that are exposed to the client side. Um, some of them have been added for additional functionality. Such of that includes job status API and some minor differences in this APIs include all of them returns, like most of them have a promise API instead of the callback API. So the syntax, the function prototype looks much more simpler. Another difference in the APIs is for order history and get NFT order details. The old SDK had only one parameter order ID, but in the new SDK, we can also specify additional optional parameters which the user may or may not specify according to his use case. For example, for the order history, the user can also set order state. So for example, if the user wants all the orders that have been passed, then he can say order state success or something. So these parameters have been taken from the Okto API documents. Um, Talking about job management, these APIs provide a convenient async await pattern for the client users. So essentially, it allows the client to perform a certain action using single SDK call instead of having two SDK calls. Three such functionalities have been added, one for transfer tokens, transfer NFTs, and execute raw transaction. So here's how the process goes. First, we have a job request, and we have a status API. So usually when a job request comes, the blockchain takes some time for the request to be processed. So that's why we have a status pooling mechanism where we check whether the job has been completed every, say, 5 seconds or 1 second. And based on that, if the job is completed, we return a response. If there's a timeout, we return a timeout error. But for the client, it's quite simple. The client just says to give the job and he returns the result. So it's client side, the mechanism looks very simple. Um, we also have provided wrapper functions for Solana.js. Solana.js, we can create transaction object, and in order for them to be executed by the Okto wallet, we need to convert the transaction object to execute raw transaction. This can be conveniently done using this function. Um, so along with this, we added an SDK example app that has support for the basic APIs. So any user who wants to learn how the SDK works can simply cross-reference, play with the example app, and it's pretty much simple to understand from here. Um, okay, so that's it from the presentation side. Let me show the demo for the example app. Uh, yeah. Okay. Um, so firstly, we need to authenticate. I've already signed in with my Google account. Then we need to authenticate. Uh, so we can do basic operations like get portfolio, supporter networks, all the basic APIs, all the APIs that the SDK provides are given here. Along with this, we have the show pin screen mechanism. So this actually uses a WASM server. So the SDK doesn't actually know the pin code, so it's very secure. We also have the bottom sheet web view. Yeah, that's it. And transfer tokens. It's the further SDKs have been updated in the docs. So all the SDKs, all the APIs that the SDK provides can be checked in the documentation. Yeah. That's it from my side, and thank you.